Welcome to the 25th Annual Newfoundland and Labrador Book Awards. Tonight, we'll be hearing from the shortlisted authors and revealing the winner of the 2021 NLBA for Nonfiction. My name is Ainsley Hawthorn. I'm Vice President of the Writers Alliance of Newfoundland and Labrador, which administers these awards, and Chair of its Literary Awards Committee. The NLBAs are held annually by the Writers Alliance to recognize excellence in writing by authors residing in Newfoundland and Labrador. I'd like to begin, however, by recognizing that Newfoundland and Labrador are the colonial names of Dahungug, the unceded territory of the Beothuk and Mi'kmaq peoples, of Nitassinan, the homeland of the Innu, and of Nunatsiavut and Nunatukavut, the homeland of the Inuit. Storytelling is integral to Indigenous communities and cultures, and Indigenous people are vibrant members of the literary community in this place. At WANL, we have begun the process of decolonizing our programming, and we welcome everyone to join us in that effort as we work towards reconciliation and a just future. Now, we're celebrating an anniversary year this evening. These are the 25th NL Book Awards, and this award program is meaningful for several reasons, not least of which is the professional recognition that it gives to authors for achievement in their work, and also the financial support that enables writers to continue pursuing literature as a career. The award winner receives a cash prize of $1,500, and the two other finalists receive $500 each. This year's awards honor the categories of nonfiction and poetry. The nonfiction shortlist was selected from a field of 14 submissions. I'd like to thank the 2021 NLBA nonfiction sponsors, the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador, the City of St. John's, the Telegram, and Perfect Day for making these awards possible. I'd also like to give a big thanks to this year's nonfiction judges, Andrea Peacock, Kerri, Cull, and Tom Moore. It is never an easy task to read through so many excellent works and select just a few for recognition, but we really appreciate the careful and thoughtful way in which you read all of these works. This evening, we'll be enjoying excerpts from each of the three shortlisted books, and I'll be announcing the winner of the award at the end. Our first finalist is Almost Feral by Gemma Hickey, and I'd like to welcome 2021 nonfiction juror Kerri Cull to tell us more about the book.
Hi, I'm Kerri Cull, and I'm one of the jury members for the 2021 Newfoundland and Labrador Nonfiction Book Awards. I'm going to talk a little bit about Almost Feral by Gemma Hickey. Unlike any book to come out of Newfoundland and Labrador, Gemma Hickey's Almost Feral is influential, educational, and inspiring. Hickey covers a myriad of topics such as identity, feminism, gender politics, trans rights, religion, sexual abuse, and recovery, and all are anchored in what it means to journey across land, through memory, and self. Not only is Almost Feral an interesting and timely read, it is also a beautiful book about family relationships, support, romance, and love. With references to Newfoundland culture, landmarks, and landscape, writers, and artists, it is an engaging, emotional, and unforgettable book. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi there, I'm Gemma Hickey, author of Almost Feral, and I'm deeply honored that my memoir has been shortlisted for the Newfoundland and Labrador Book Awards in the nonfiction category. Congrats to my fellow authors, to my publisher, Breakwater Books, and thanks to the Writers Alliance for not only sponsoring this award, but also for continuing to elevate literary talent in this fine province of ours. We have so much to be proud of. My memoir isn't only about my walk across Newfoundland, although that's the narrative arc of the story. It's about relationships, one's relationship to themselves, to those around them, and even to the land that we inhabit. It's about complicated histories and how identities intersect when these histories come in conflict with those identities. The chapter I'm going to read from today is called Colonial Street, and I hope you enjoy it. Melancholia is most annoying. I learned how to lament early on, and I was ridiculously good at it. Longing latched onto my heart and refused to let go. Or maybe it was the other way around. Oh, the yearning, woe to me, barf. Now, there have been periods in my life when I've experienced real depression, but that's not what I mean. I missed Ireland deeply. It was my homeland after all. I wasn't born there, nor did I reside there for any length of time. Oh, and I've also never been there, except in songs. I inherited this affliction from my mother's brothers, who sang Irish ballads at every family get-together. When his father lost his voice to throat cancer, my Uncle Tony became the voice of Irish immigrants everywhere. The water was indeed wide. When he sang, he would close his eyes, and I swear to God, the man thought he was transporting us all in St. Brennan's leather-clad boat back to the old country. Seriously, it's as though we had never left. The type of nostalgia I grew up with is common among those Newfoundlanders who feel a kinship with Ireland, because that's where their ancestors came from. But sentimentality doesn't move us forward. In fact, it keeps us stuck in the past and reaffirms the construction of binaries. It's why we think in terms of Catholics versus Protestants, and that sectarianism settled right here with us. We may have been colonized by the English, but what we Irish Catholics don't seem to account for is that we came over here too, and are therefore culpable in the seizure of Indigenous lands. It's impossible to feel nostalgia for that past. The body of water that surrounds Newfoundland is not only lined with the scars of foreign trawlers, it's a cemetery full of unmarked graves. Our ancestors risked their lives to live here. The fishery and the seal hunt have claimed the lives of countless Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. Colonization claimed the lives of an entire Indigenous nation and culture, the Beothuk. The Mi'kmaq, the Inuit, and the Natsivut, and the Natikavat, and the Innu continue to struggle for fairness and equality. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians often have a tendency to romanticize their history of hard times because so many of our traditions, our songs, and even our cuisine are rooted in our ability to survive. Islanders celebrate and identify strongly with our physical landscape and our history, but in doing so, we risk becoming oblivious to our past mistakes. I remember a coloring book I was given when I was younger. It showed Sir Humphrey Gilbert triumphantly arriving in St. John's, taking possession of the island for Queen Elizabeth I in 1583. The package of crayons I was using actually contained a crayon called Flesh, which resembled the color of my skin, Caucasian. I put up my hand. "Miss, why is there only one color for skin?" I asked. "Just color the Indians brown or black," she answered. At the time, I was struggling with how to color the two Indigenous people in the Newfoundland coat of arms, an image that was also included in the coloring book. The depiction of two Beothuk warriors, of course, is an interpretation of the British illustrator. A shield is placed between the two Beothuk, who are holding it in their hands. A white or silver cross, supposedly a reverse take on the cross of St. George, divides the shield into four quarters consisting of two lions and two unicorns, linking Newfoundland to the United Kingdom. There's an elk or a caribou located above the shield and perched on a ribbon that also links Newfoundland to England. The motto located underneath the shield in Latin is from Matthew 6:33, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God." But really there was only one kingdom, the British Empire. The Beothuk were native to Newfoundland and are now extinct. Shannon was believed to be the last of her kind. The company who manufactured the crayons later discontinued the flesh color. In my opinion, it should never have been developed to begin with. And as for the coat of arms, they were formally granted in 1637, adapted in 1928, but as of 2018, the provincial government has put plans in motion to have it redesigned with input from Indigenous people, because the official description of the Beothuk in the arms refers to them as savages. There are two prominent memorials in the capital city's downtown public common, Bannerman Park. The first one was erected in 1889 in honor of a priest named Michael Morris, who apparently single-handedly nursed orphans suffering from typhoid until he succumbed to the illness himself. The second one is the Shannon Memorial. Shannon was captured in 1823 and in 1828 was brought to St. John's, where she lived as a servant until her death in 1829. She died of tuberculosis. Apparently she frequented the grounds since she lived nearby, but I find it rather ominous that her memorial is placed mere steps away from the Colonial Building, the former home of the Newfoundland government and House of Assembly, which has recently been restored. I actually live on Colonial Street, just within walking distance of this massive colonial symbol. The Colonial Building hosted many galas, exhibitions, even protests and riots. It has a rich political history as well. the winning of responsible government in 1855, and the inaugural National Convention in 1946, for example. The cost of construction was expensive back then, as the front was fashioned out of white Irish limestone with 6 sizable phallic columns. However, the cost to restore it was far greater. In addition to refurbishing the inside of the building, construction crews worked non-stop, cutting down old trees and tearing up the landscape around the area to ensure the building and its grounds would more closely resemble the past. I'm proud to be a Newfoundlander and the descendant of Irish settlers who sought a better life and the freedom to express their faith on another continent. But I'm not prepared to accept my cultural past without recognizing the disastrous mistakes of that past. I've heard arguments to the contrary, qualifications and excuses, but I see what happened to the Beothuk as nothing less than genocide. And I am unwilling to accept an identity which remains blind to historical cruelty, an identity hoodwinked by nostalgia. When we accept an individual identity, we inevitably become a part of a larger group. But larger groups tend to set the boundaries of our identities. They decide what behaviors and attitudes are acceptable. And this attempt to control people can lead to uniformity and stagnation. When an individual challenges the group with whom they identify, they can inspire change or run the risk of being cast aside. I was beginning to think that many of the beliefs passed down to me were far more imagined than real. And even though my identity didn't seem clear to me at the time, even though something didn't feel exactly right to me, and that I was only learning it as I went along, I was at least ready to start challenging the dominant group. What I discovered is that some people are willing to expand their identities to embrace others, and some people will cast you out.
Thanks very much, Gemma, for your reading. Our next finalist is The Foresters Scribe by Ursula Kelly. I'd like to introduce 2021 nonfiction juror Tom Moore, who will give us the jury's thoughts on The Foresters Scribe.
Hi, my name is Tom Moore. I'm an award-winning writer in St. John's, Newfoundland. And today, I'm also one of the 3 jurors who picked the Newfoundland Labrador Prize for nonfiction. This is sponsored by the Writers Alliance, Newfoundland and Labrador. And we've each got a book to tell our thoughts, a summary of one of the 3 books that are in our current shortlist. And the book that I've been assigned to discuss is called The Foresters Scribe by Ursula Kelly, which has made, as I say, the shortlist. The winner will be announced later. So let me tell you what we thought about this fine book. I also got to say, it's amazing to me, having first time served as a judge on this nonfiction, the quality of the work we dealt with. We were presented with 14 books. We had to bring down our numbers to 6 and then try to pick from that 6 the 3 that made the short list. Well, here's the one that I'll be reading to you, the blurb. The Foresters Scribe by Ursula Kelly. There are many stories written about Newfoundland and Labrador's involvement in World War I. But the Foresters Scribe, remembering Newfoundland forestry companies through the First World War, the letters of Regimental Quartermaster Sergeant John A. Barrett, brings a new perspective. Kelly, the author, uses John A. Barrett's letters and involvement in the Newfoundland Forestry Company to fill in some gaps in our history. While educating the reader on the Newfoundland Forestry Company, she influences how we remember Newfoundland's contribution to the Great War and highlights our strength and presence in a new way. Kelly shows that while we generally center our remembrance around the 1st Battalion of the Newfoundland Regiment, the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, there were many forces and people who served in various ways, and those companies, projects, and individuals can sometimes be forgotten or overlooked. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ursula Kelly, and I'm reading from my book, The Foresters Scribe, which is the story of the Newfoundland forestry companies of the First World War. At the center of this history and commemoration is a series of letters by Regimental Quartermaster Sergeant John A. Barrett, I'm going to read from one of Barrett's letters. This particular letter is dated August 26, 1917, and would have been written approximately 2 months after the first draft of Foresters arrived in Scotland. At this point in the company's work, they are awaiting the arrival of other foresters from Newfoundland, and they are still really setting up camp to do the work that they will do over the duration of their service. When this letter was published in the Evening Herald, it was published under the title, 7th Report of Newfoundland Forestry Companies. Dear Sir, it was an agreeable surprise we had on the morning of Thursday the 23rd, when a draft of foresters arrived at an early hour. We had just finished breakfast and were preparing for the day's work when word was received that men had arrived at the railway station and were on their way to camp. Some little excitement prevailed as men hustled hither and thither, finalizing the necessary preparations for the receipt of this draft. Upon their arrival, they were issued with plates, mugs, knives, forks, and spoons, after which they retired to the cookhouse, where they were served with a hearty meal. After then ensued a busy time, as blankets and other necessary bedding were issued and the finishing touches given the bunkhouses. Those of A Company were solicitous from the new arrivals respecting their relatives and friends at home. But don't feel surprised when I tell you that the first inquiries of some were respecting tobacco. If a person is seen here with a stick of mayos, he is envied beyond measure, and the owner of it has to guard well his treasure. It was hoped that Captain O'Grady would be coming with this draft. We all have the kindest regard for him, and shall be forever grateful to him for his painstaking efforts when conducting our drills. Major Sullivan is our commanding officer, with Captain Ross as adjutant. Lieutenant O'Rourke is quartermaster. Lieutenant Gillis will have charge of one of the mill gangs. These officers came with the draft, and the men all speak in the highest terms of the treatment received at their hands while on the trip from Newfoundland. Logging operations are being continued as vigorously as ever, and from now on there'll be something doing in Craigvinian Woods. Already the hillsides are strewn with logs, awaiting transportation to the road. In the felling of this timber, all the trees are notched with an axe by a special man in each gang, who works under the supervision of the sergeants. These men plan which way the trees may fall. The notcher always consults with his sergeant. Great care is taken in every instance to see that the axe cuttings are not too deep or broad, thereby avoiding the spoiling of any of the mercantilable timber. The cutting down of all this timber is going to change the appearance of the country around here, because at present this section is looked upon as the prettiest part of the whole of Scotland. The cutting down of those parts of the forest which are ripe for the axe will have the effect of exposing numerous brown barren hills, and the game which are now shelter on them will be driven further afield. A trolley track has been laid from the little mill opposite the huts to a point on the hillside where the chute is to be built. The new mill at the foot of the hill is being rushed to completion. It is hoped to have it in running order by the 10th of September. The weather of late has been working overtime, treating us to an abundance of Scotch mist, as the folk hereabout term the rain we are getting. It couldn't possibly be wetter if it were cats and dogs instead of Scotch mist. Of course, this weather has a tendency to dampen the cook's ardor for outdoor cooking. Speaking about cooks reminds me that 2 of our men are being sent to the School of Cookery, Edinburgh, to take a technical course. But all the boys are well and beginning to like this place very much. Once they get acquainted with the country folk as well as those of the town, they will like the place much better. Yours respectfully, John A. Barrett, Newfoundland Forestry Companies. Thank you for listening, and thank you as well to the Writers Alliance of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you very much, Ursula. Our last finalist is A Long Journey by Andrea Procter. Now 2021 nonfiction juror Andrea Peacock will bring us the jury's comments on A Long Journey.
Hi, I'm Andrea Peacock. I had the privilege of being a member of the jury for the 2021 Newfoundland and Labrador Book Awards for nonfiction. This year, the jury was given an impressive group of books to look through, and it was no easy task to come up with a short list of 3. One of the books that did make our shortlist was A Long Journey, Residential Schools in Labrador and Newfoundland by Andrea Procter. This is published by ICER Books. I'd like to read for you now the jury's comments on A Long Journey. Andrea Procter's A Long Journey, Residential Schools in Labrador and Newfoundland is a comprehensive, purposeful, important book. Procter provides a powerful history of the residential school system dating back to 1770 and handles the sensitive subject matter with respect and objectivity. From the Moravian Mission boarding schools in Makivik and Nain to the International Grenfell Association boarding schools in Cartwright, St. Mary's River, and St. Anthony, Procter showcases the voices of those involved with intensive research and teaches the reader about a part of history that has never before come to light. Resonating behind the specifics of this book is the theme of reclamation and reconciliation, pointing to the determination and need for Indigenous communities to own their stories, education, and culture. Timely, important, well-written, and intensely researched, it's a book that we'll be reading and studying for many years to come. I strongly recommend A Long Journey for everyone to read. It's an important book and deserves a large readership. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrea Procter. I'm the author of A Long Journey, Residential Schools in Labrador and Newfoundland, which I'm very honored to learn has been shortlisted for the award. And thank you to the Writers Alliance of Newfoundland and Labrador for sponsoring the award. So I'm going to read part of chapter 11, which is about the dormitory and boarding school in Northwest River. And at this point, most of the children who lived in the dormitory were from northern Labrador, from Nunatsiavut now. For many children from coastal communities, integration in Northwest River was a difficult experience. Some encountered racism for the first time, in the community, at the school, and in the dormitory. Kator Abel came to Northwest River from Hopedale for high school between 1969 and 1974. She recalls a sense of alienation upon her arrival to the community. She said, "As soon as we hit the dock, when the plane landed and got off the plane, I could feel how out of place we were there. And it hit me right hard. I said, oh my God, I didn't think it would be like this." And that's when I think I first experienced how hurtful people could be and how much prejudice hurts. Rosie Mitzuk, also from Hopedale, remembers physical and verbal abuse. She said, "Verbal abuse all the time, and it was from the same group of people. I wonder why they had to be like that. I mean, what kind of upbringing did they have? To be like that, to treat people the way they treated us. The physical abuse was bad, like being run after and I had my hair pulled. The verbal abuse was the worst, being called Skimos, Eskimos, and making fun of our language." Ivy Anderson Strangemore of Makovic also remembers a mixed reception from the people of Northwest River. She said, "Some of the people were really friendly, but a lot of the people were really not friendly and we were looked down at. And we were always made to feel that we weren't as good as anybody else. We were always put down. That was the biggest thing I found and the hardest thing that I had to overcome. When I finally got out on my own and went away to school and stuff, I really had to convince myself that I was just as good as the person next to me and that I could do just as well." Evelyn Winters, who grew up in Kamasuk and Nain, quit school after grade 9 after an incident with a teacher in Northwest River. She said, "One of the teachers pointed at me, and they saw someone walking down the road who had quit school and was on welfare. And they said, you're going to be just like those people out there. You're going to have kids year after year and you're never going to amount to anything." And when he said that, you know what? I took my books and I left and I never went back. I was just so hurt and sick. After spending time in Northwest River, many students found adjusting to the return home very difficult. Although they looked forward to seeing their families, the transition back to their communities could be painful and confusing. Everyone had changed to some degree, both those who had left and those who had remained at home, as Edna MacDonald McLean from Paradise River describes. She said, "When the school year ended, I went home for the summer. I felt rather foreign, changed. My parents and siblings didn't seem the same, and my old friends, while not exactly mean, neither were they totally welcoming. I was an outsider now, and it seemed I no longer fit at school. I no longer fit at home. In different situations, boarding school had set this pattern for my life for many, many years to come. It's so very emotionally draining sometimes, but I let the good things in my life overrule these feelings most of the time. I have survived and learned to cope." Life in the Northwest River dormitories was a miserable experience for many children. For most, the months spent away from home resulted in splintered family relationships, a forgotten language, and a newfound shame of Indigenous culture. Students and their families decided that this was not acceptable. As the next chapter describes, Inuit from the northern communities of Nain, Hopedale, Makkovik, Postville, and Rigolet challenged the boarding school system in the 1960s and 1970s. Like the families of children at Lockwood and the Makkovik boarding school before them, the families of children at the Northwest River dormitories demanded better. Together, they pushed for schooling opportunities in their own communities so children did not have to leave home to get an education. The Yale dormitories' days were numbered.
Thank you very much for that reading, Andrea. Now, it gives me great pleasure to announce the recipient of this year's 2021 Newfoundland and Labrador Book Award for Nonfiction. The winner is A Long Journey by Andrea Procter. Well done to all of our finalists, and congratulations, Andrea, on this wonderful achievement. I am informed that Andrea and Memorial University Press are donating all prize monies received by the book to further residential school commemoration efforts in Labrador. So that is a wonderful purpose to which to put this money. Thank you again to all of our jurors and our authors. Big thanks to our award sponsors, without whom this would not be possible. Those are the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador, the City of St. John's, the Telegram, and Perfect Day. Tomorrow night, you can tune in for the E.J. Pratt Poetry Award readings and winner announcement. They'll take place at 7 p.m. on Thursday, September 30th, live on WANL's Facebook page. If you can't catch it at that time, the recording will be available afterwards. Thank you everyone for watching. For more information on WANL and our programs and services, please go to www.wanl.ca.